For the last month, we have been eating exclusively from our pantry. I did tell myself I would make one exception this year for the pantry challenge, and that is we have been allowing ourselves to purchase fresh fruit. But other than that, everything's coming out of the pantry, the garden. It's such a good way to use up all the preserved food we made this year and really make the most of it before we go into next season. So today I'm sharing 3 of the dinner meals that we have made so far. A big thank you to KiwiCo for sponsoring this video. I am getting over a cold, so I apologize in advance about my voice in this video. This meal we made at the beginning of January, and we still had a significant amount of fresh vegetables in the garden to pull from and use for this meal. So I am harvesting some kale because we're going to make kale chips to go on top of our potato soup, and we're also going to be making a salad to go with the soup. The lettuce that I am harvesting here, it looks really sparse because these are actually volunteer lettuce that came up from my spring planting, and then we went to summer, they went to seed, and I have a few volunteers there. The other thing that I'm harvesting for greens for the salad is also a volunteer plant from something I planted last year.
What are we picking, weeds?
This is mâche. M-A-C-H-E. It's French.
Okay, cool.
So I'm actually not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but over the last few years that we have grown mâche, it has become one of my favorite winter greens to grow. The flavor is so good. It's unlike anything I've ever tasted, with a super strong nutty aftertaste. And the texture, it's not like a lettuce, it's a little bit more like a spinach. And so it's really good mixed into salads with other greens that have different textures in the salad. Another huge benefit of this winter green is that it's super cold hardy. The only downside of the mâche is that it's really tiny, and so it's a little bit more difficult to harvest. So for the potato soup, we make that really simply with just minimal ingredients. We pulled out some potatoes from the pantry, and we're also cooking up some peppered bacon from the pigs that we raised this year. This is going to be a topping for the potato soup. As the bacon was cooking, we started to work on the soup. One of the things that we put in potato soup at the very end is cheese, and we do 2 different types of cheeses. One is Parmesan, so we grate that up really fine, and then the other one is cheddar cheese, and we just cube that up small enough so that when we stir it in at the end, it all melts. As you saw a little earlier, we peel off most of the skins of the potatoes. When we're making mashed potatoes or something like that, we usually leave a good amount of skins on because we like them. But for this potato soup, it's kind of a smooth soup, and having chunks of skins in there just makes it not taste quite as good. So we take those off for the soup. I'm adding some butter to the bottom of this pan, and initially I added a little bit too much, so I ended up taking some of that out, and then I throw in a handful of garlics. I probably put in 20-ish cloves of garlic, maybe like 1.5 bulbs worth, and then I let those brown. Next, I'm adding in all of the potatoes that we peeled and cubed, and then finally we're adding a couple jars of chicken broth, and I also add some water in addition to the chicken broth, and I let those potatoes cook until they are soft. While those potatoes were cooking, I got started on making kale chips. The kale chips will be another topping for the soup. As I mentioned earlier, the soup itself is very simple, and it's all about adding some delicious toppings to make it taste good. For these kale chips, we are putting them into the oven to bake. A lot of times I'll do dehydrated kale chips, but that takes a long time, and we were in a hurry for dinner, so these are going into the oven. I just put on some olive oil and a little bit of salt and pepper. I didn't really measure anything, I just made it to taste. In order to get these kale chips to all dry at the same rate, you have to spread them out pretty good, so I added another baking sheet here to make sure that they had enough space. After about 20 minutes, those were finished, and we took them out of the oven to cool off, and also the potato soup was finished. So I used my immersion blender to puree the soup. If you saw my last video, you saw that this is new for me. Usually we put the whole soup into the blender and blend it all up that way, but the immersion blender is really nice. It's a lot faster. So we were able to just blend it right inside the soup pot, and then we added the cheese after that. The final step here was to make a dressing to go onto the salad, And I already had some vinaigrette stuff made up in the fridge, but I was in the mood for something a little creamier. So I made sort of like a ranch dressing. And anytime I make dressing, for the most part, I'm just kind of winging it along the way and just using what we have. I actually did this a little bit out of order. Usually I would make the dressing first because salad dressings taste better when they have a little bit of time to sit and the flavors can kind of mix together. Even though I didn't do it the ideal way, it still ended up tasting really good. So to serve this, we add the potato soup first, then the toppings. I'm adding some crunched up kale chips and then bacon that we just chop into little pieces and then chives on the soup. And then finally, we just do a big bowl of salad and add the dressing on top of that. Last week, we welcomed the newest member of our family, and we are all so excited, but we knew it might be a little bit of a difficult transition for one of our family members, and that is Riggs. He's used to getting all of the attention. So to help ease the transition for him, we got him the KiwiCo Panda Crate. And the Panda Crate is KiwiCo's club for babies ages 0 to 36 months. So we actually got one for the newborn baby as well. They get a crate delivered every other month that is specific to that 2-month period of development. When we opened up the crate, it was awesome to see how quickly Riggs caught on. He was both having fun and learning and playing all at the same time. Our newborn, his nickname is Bear, and as you can see, Bear is a little bit sleepy because he's only a few days old. So he is going to have lots of time, months and months, to be able to use these items. They are fun for all ages. So overall, I am so impressed with how quality the KiwiCo Panda Crates are. And if you want to check them out, I have a link in the video description. And you can use my code Seasonal Homestead for 20% off your first Panda Crate.
We're eating pizza tomorrow as a family, so that means I need to prep the dough 24 hours in advance. So I'm doing that right now. It doesn't take long to prep, and then we'll let proof overnight and then divide it out into dough balls tomorrow. I've probably made this pizza recipe, well, I've probably made more than a couple hundred pizzas, and nobody yet has told me they don't like it. So it's a pretty good batch. We do use our sourdough starter for it, so it's slightly modified from most of the recipes you'll find online.
After the dough has been mixed, then I will proof it in the fridge for 24 hours. I've tried longer periods of time and shorter periods for proofing, and 24 hours seems to be the perfect amount of time. A few hours before we're ready to serve, I will pull the dough out and form it into dough balls. I've done enough of these that I'm pretty good at getting close to the 290 gram dough balls that they need to be. There's a German game show where the contestants are asked to cut irregular shaped objects in half to see how close they can get to an equal cut on both sides. And I feel like I would do pretty good on that show. The mic I was using just failed, so here's my attempt at a bad lip reading. Hey, here we go. $2, actually $7. So you really let it sit out for about 6 years. And you just set it out for a couple hours. Bop, it's ready to go. Okay, that bad lip reading was much harder to do in real life. Back to serious mode here for a little bit. One of the reasons I love cooking pizza so much is how flexible you can be with the toppings. You can stick with the basics and make a phenomenal pizza. And you can also try something new and unique and still create something that is awesome. And especially since we're in the middle of our pantry challenge, we're leaning more to the creative side for this batch of pizza. I had some fun making some miniature Italian sausage meatballs, whatever you want to call them, and those turned out really good. So that's probably something I'll repeat in future pizzas. I'm just going through the pantry and grabbing what looks good, and so I've got some freeze-dried basil, some peppers, and some mushrooms. So kind of sticking with the classics on this one. One of Becky's favorite pizzas is a pear and prosciutto pizza on an olive oil base. We didn't have any pears, but we had some apples. So this time around, it'll be an apple ham slice pizza instead of pear prosciutto. I'm pretty sure it's going to taste just as good. This olive oil base that I'm making is a staple at our house. Whenever we do pizzas, we usually cook half the pizzas with tomato sauce and half of them with this olive oil sauce. It's super simple to make. It's only a couple ingredients. It's olive oil, crushed garlic, crushed basil, and salt and pepper to taste. And I don't think I've ever really measured out the ingredients. I've just kind of done it to where it looks good and thick enough to be a sauce on a pizza. I mentioned earlier in the video that I have cooked pizza a lot. So I have the process down pretty good. I know exactly what I need. And so here I'm setting it up outside. I prefer to do it outside because it can get a little messy and it's just easier to sweep all the crumbs off the deck. I'm ready. Gotta put this on. So I've got my cornmeal on the pizza heels so that the dough doesn't stick. Being sourdough, it's not as stretchy as like what you would get at a pizzeria where they use just all white flour. It just makes it a little more delicate of a dough, so you gotta be mindful of that. It was hard to show here how fast these pizzas cook, but that's what we love about doing pizzas as a family. We usually cook 6 to 8 pizzas to feed our family. A good pizza oven should get between 700 and 800 degrees Fahrenheit. So these pizzas are in and out in a matter of 60 to 75 seconds. So it doesn't take long at all to cook enough pizzas to, to feed our family. Delicious.
The last meal that we're making is beef stew. This is a really good hearty meal that uses a lot of pantry ingredients. So I grabbed some freeze-dried onions and then we grabbed some beef stock. I'm grabbing potatoes to go into this. I also got some pizza sauce. I use this in place of like tomato sauce a lot of times. Next is freeze-dried carrots. And then I still had some celery in my garden and some herbs, so I walked outside to go and get those things. I go through different phases in my cooking where sometimes I will meal plan a whole bunch, and over the last couple of years I've kind of moved away from that and I don't do so much meal planning. I just use what I have in the garden, and that kind of helps me to get inspired as to what to make every night. So they kind of both have their pros and cons, but one of the things that does help me a lot is we have a bunch of frozen meat. I take out a whole bunch of that meat at the beginning of the week, and that kind of helps me to shape some meals around it. When we're in the middle of winter like this, what we have available in the garden isn't changing every single week like it is in the summer. So I do keep a list of winter meal ideas that really helps me to think of what I can make during the winter when all of the ingredients are pretty similar for several months in a row. Just kind of simplifies things for me. So beef stew is one of those meals on the list. I'm adding some garlic from the pantry and then some rosemary that we picked. And we also picked celery, and I'm using the entire celery stalk and all of the leaves for this. I don't normally do that, but since our veggies are more scarce this time of year, I make sure to use everything that we have. During the pantry challenge, something that can be a struggle is making sure that you're not sacrificing nutrition for the sake of meeting the goal of the challenge and not going to the grocery store or using up what you have. The first year we ever did a pantry challenge was 2017 going into 2018. My sister Amy had been doing a no grocery shopping month for several years, and I told Amy, I was like, I want to try that. So I didn't really get any instructions from her. We did not do any grocery shopping in advance. We just hopped right into it, and I did about a month and a half of no grocery shopping, and by the end of that, I was so sick. It was such a drastic change in what I was used to eating, and we didn't have enough vegetables. It was very eye-opening, and from that year on, I didn't do a pantry challenge for several years after that. But what we did do instead is we set that goal to grow all of our own vegetables from our backyard garden. So that was a really good goal to do. It's now been 5 years since we bought a vegetable from the grocery store, and through all of those years, we have gotten better and better at our planning and preparation in making sure that we have a lot of vegetables to choose from all throughout the year. So we have finally reached the point where even during the pantry challenge, we are eating really well, and we're making sure that we're getting a lot of vegetables during this time as well. Usually I will make a stew like this and then put it in the oven and let it cook on low for several hours. But because I was filming this meal, it took me a lot longer to make. Usually it takes me almost double the time when I'm recording something to make it. And so dinner time was coming up fast, and I was like, I'll just cook this on the stovetop instead, and I think it'll be a little bit faster. So the result was a little bit different than normal. It was a little bit more soupy, and we added some cornstarch to kind of thicken it up. It took a little while to get that meat to soften to the right texture, but my family still really enjoyed it, so that is what matters in the end.